Hey, man.
What's going on, dude?
It's beginning to wonder where everybody was.
Everybody's punctual, man.
All
That's
that turkey's still in people's system.
oh man. How you doing today?
Good.
Nice. Wow. My partner recently purchased some land down in Schuyler, and we've been working on that project. There's about 2/3 of a house, you know, that's missing about a third of a roof, which is entertainment.
Sounds like fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Peggy. Tim, Mark, they're all coming on board.
Hello. Happy December.
I was wondering a minute ago, it was approaching 5. I thought everybody still had turkey coursing through their veins. Just like, I know there's a meeting today because I got an invite. And nobody said they wouldn't be attending, so
Yeah.
hey, Mike. Hey, Mark.
Who takes minutes? Mike?
Mike takes the minutes, yes.
I'll send him a copy of what I'm going to prepare, what I'm reading for the oral report.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks. That's helpful. Used to be you just walk into a meeting, you'd sit at the table. Now you have to adjust everything in your environment. You have to get the angle right. One of my lamps burned out, so I'm sitting here half in shadows. I didn't realize it just before the meeting. I went to turn it on, the bulb is burned. You don't have these problems when you just have to go to a meeting space. All right, we'll wait for a couple more so we have a better quorum. We have a quorum, but we'll wait. Hey,
Hey, gang. Well, long time no see, it feels like.
yeah, it's a quick 5 weeks. Mark is on that same street, that same lovely street of trees. Is that your aspiration?
You're muted, Mark.
There you go.
What's so hard about a street full of trees? That's what I want to know. Or a street along the railroad full of trees.
They should all look like that.
Yeah.
Mark, is that a picture you took or is that just like a random background picture?
This was an internet, this was an internet picture.
So we're 9. I had no regrets for the other 4. Mike, did you hear anything back from anybody?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Okay, well, we have a quorum. It's 5:04, so we will proceed. I'll call the December meeting of the Tree Commission to order. First order of business, the minutes from October, which you were sent last week. If you all had a chance to review, are there any corrections, additions, deletions, any of that?
Mike, I had one thing. I'm sorry, I don't have it open. Where we talk about, just a minor thing, we talked about giving Katz the report on the strategic plan. I thought we ought to say, I'm sorry, I don't have it. Anyway, at the end of the paragraph there, just, we'd give them the report after we sent it to City Council, just to clarify that.
Okay,
Just a minor thing,
sure.
which we've already done.
Which is what we did, correct.
Yes.
And they shared it with their membership. Any other?
I
Comment?
had a few comments that I had sent Mike via email. Did you get those?
I don't remember seeing those comments.
Since November 11th. So the October minutes, remove corrections in place of abstain, change the other words to approve the minutes. I sent it on the 11th. In the bylaws, does this ring a bell? Mike, to
No.
confirm with Sebastian, process for changes to bylaws, internal vote, council approved, etc.
No. I
Sorry,
don't-
this is for last year. I apologize, Mike. That's why I searched my emails.
Yeah,
I wrote Mike some comments about, that's November 11th last year. I apologize. No comments.
Okay,
You know, I had a, there was one thing that wasn't clear as I read through it, which was just that as one of Mike's action items was making changes to the CIP requests as discussed. And I kind of scrolled back to look at what we kind of concluded with that. There wasn't really any detail to it. So I'm left to hope that whatever changes are made was what we discussed. Yeah, I appreciate that the minutes are kept, simple and brief and don't go into who said what. But in that case, it was kind of like, what did we decide on? I don't remember.
well, one of them was to not put forward the requests for mall trees.
Right.
So I think that one occurred, but I can't, that's a good question, Mark. I'm trying to remember what the others. There were several.
It often, that's often a discussion that can rehash old topics, and it seems like the commission takes a while to get up to speed, and it'd be nice to just have it anchored down and remember why we did what we did.
Mike, will you be addressing this in your report in a while?
No, I was going to just update sort of where the CIP process is for this city, the timeline, and opportunities for public input. I can add more detail, Mark. I have that in my notes. that the commission, and that went forward in the CIP request, but I think there's like more detail about we wanted 75,000 for planting and why. And there's more detail with the Elmwood ash borer removals about changing the title, something more urgent. There's other details like that. I can put that in here.
Yeah, I was less interested in sort of some of the background, although it's helpful. It's just sort of what we concluded, if there was something, you know. I mean, I guess it's also fluid. It's not final, right? That was one of the points, is that you're making these updates, but there are other opportunities to look at it as the process moves forward.
I mean, it's been submitted, and like I said, we'll give I can provide a timeline for opportunities for input.
Right. Right.
Okay, so Mike will amend the minutes, but I do think the major decision was to not go forward. I think it was the consensus to not go forward with that request for the mall, correct, Mike?
That's correct.
That's everybody's recollection.
Yeah, that would be good to have a record of.
Yep.
Further, otherwise they're good.
Sorry, I cut you off. What were you
No,
gonna say?
I'm just saying, otherwise the minutes look good to me.
Okay. Anything else with those corrections?
I just apologize. Could you tell me when the minutes arrived? I, for some reason, don't have them, don't see them. And I've been searching for them, but when did they show up?
November 25th, they're the agenda packet from Mike.
Oh, sorry, I have that. Okay, got it. So
Yeah, the
it's-
minutes are in the packet. Yep.
all right, I'm always looking. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That says minutes.
It's the most discussion we've had about minutes in a long time.
Hmm.
Anything further? With those corrections, amendments, additions, is there a motion to approve? Or do we want to see them at the next meeting?
I move to approve the minutes with the corrections noted.
I'll second it.
Peggy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Second.
Next in my report, it was a conversation at the Education Advocacy meeting, correct, everybody, a few weeks ago, or about how we could move forward with creating a space. I think there's some effort to come up with, and suggested by Brian Wheeler, that it's pretty standard that we set up using Microsoft Teams. So we are moving in that direction. There was the holiday then intervened, and I think another holiday or two will intervene this month, but then starting in January, hopefully we'll have a consensus on what we want in there and how we want to use it, but there's a solution. So I've said it the last two meetings, but stay tuned, that change is coming. We'll be able to do all our work, post things, and I guess enter the 21st century in 2021, so.
Is that something, Anson, are you going to kind of get involved in that?
Well,
Oh,
Paul,
sure. I mean, I think Brian Wheeler has a really good system, and I think the deal is we'll all be able to participate. But
It's-
I'll be glad to help any way I can.
Well, I mean, we need to move all rocks. Is it, we're
Yeah.
talking about moving,
So-
rocks.
So to be clear here, there's a technological solution. That's not the issue. We've got it. The question was, and I know Paul had mentioned it, and a few of us had said, hey, what do we want on there? How do we want to create the structure, the tree structure, what documents we want there? How do we want that space to work? And that's the thing that we still need to work on, not the technological solution. So Anson can participate in that, but it's not in his court to come up with that, because we have that. So we, Paul and a few of others who've had some interest, and I think Paul and I are going to be working. I'm going to be picking his brain in the coming weeks so we can get this report together, this annual report. So I think we'll kick this one into January, and then we'll set up a better system for doing our work and posting everything. I wanted to provide you several updates. First, on the strategic plan. In your packet, you'll see that we sent the statement that we prepared for the strategic plan. The update, some of you may know this, is that City Council was to take this up right before Thanksgiving, made a decision to postpone that, worked on budget issues. And the last I had heard, it would be considered, possibly considered later. I'm not sure when that's going to be. Also had heard that there's a possibility that it will be deferred and they will stay with the existing strategic plan until some things settle in terms of new city administration. So I don't, Peggy may know more than that, but just so you know that our statement went out. We didn't obviously comment because there wasn't a real opportunity to comment. So we do have the statement there and we are prepared when the process moves forward to re-engage with that. Did you want to add, Peggy?
Well, it's on the city calendar for the strategic planning session council on December 15th. But I emailed the clerk and she said that's tentative.
Okay. So I mean, we obviously have the statement before them, and the question is if there's an opportunity to provide comment, we'll continue to make sure that we do that. The report to council, the update there is that we had been planning to make that presentation this month. When we actually looked at a number of calendars and schedules, including when we would have to get it to council, and we were still working on the data, Peggy and I made the decision to postpone that into January. At the time, there wasn't a January meeting on the council's calendar, but I communicated with the clerk and they've added a meeting to January 19th. So we're essentially just postponing it by a month. I think it suits everybody's schedule and we need to get that right and get it complete. So that is why I referred a moment ago to my reaching out to Paul after this meeting in the coming weeks, just to see if we can get that together. Now, obviously I'm not saying your responsibility, Paul, but I have some questions, so I'll be in touch with you. What we're hoping is that we'll have a draft of the report, which we sent around in the meeting packets to refresh memories of what that looks like, and also for new members. That report is essentially a four-pager that is essentially commentary on the data charts, the final data we're going to look at in a little while. Also provides some activities, a list of activities of the year to council. Hopefully, the plan is, the schedule is to have a draft of that done by December 16th. So I will be working on that. Pretty much the only tree commission thing I'll do next week will be to work on that and then get it to the full commission for its review by December 29th. That date is a little tentative, but basically to have it so that it's before we have our meeting in January, so that the commission can approve the final report, which is on the calendar always for the commission to approve the final report. And then it has to go to council on January 8th so that we can present on January 19th. For those of you who are not in the Education Advocacy Committee, there are multiple parts to this, which we discussed, and Paul and Roxanne refreshed us on the procedure. There is a report, which will be 4 to 5 pages again, that goes to council in advance of the meeting. And then there's a presentation, which is sort of bills in the report, which will sound a lot like what's in the statement on the strategic plan. A lot of the same messaging, and that is a PowerPoint presentation, which fortunately doesn't have to get done in the next couple of weeks. Something I'll be working on more in January, but that's the schedule now. So we continue to move forward, and we'll talk a bit more about that report a couple of items down. Lastly, since it's the last meeting of the year, I thought it'd be good to catch everybody up on the various street projects that we're involved in. It's also a way to, as we've been doing each meeting, to educate new members, the kinds of things that the Tree Commission does, how we interact with others in the community, other groups, other parts of city government. So through the Smart Scale project, which is a competitive VDOT program for funding road projects, the city, all localities compete, all municipalities compete for that money. And the city has several projects ongoing in different phases right now. And the Tree Commission has representatives on all of them. The Barracks Road project, which I've been working on as a steering committee before I became chair, that group actually met the day of our last meeting. So I didn't attend the meeting. That worked through the summer, and they're at 60% design drawings. And I think the next step, they've gotten some feedback from city, and I think there's some more design elements, some more design stages. Really the chief thing at the meeting in October was to select the cladding for the walls that are going to run a good portion of that. Those of you who remember, we talked about this in the Barracks Road project. The walls are of varying heights, and so really don't want to get in the weeds about they don't choose the material I would have chosen, but they're moving forward on those sort of design decisions. I think the critical thing for us to re-engage, for the tree commission to re-engage, is when they get to the next stage of knowing really more of like where those walls are going to be in the heights, and also sort of the overlay with the tree inventory there, so we can get a better sense of, will we have an opportunity to weigh in and see if need be, to try to save some of the more mature large canopy trees. But right now, there's not a lot for us to do to engage in that process. Jody has been representing us on Fontaine of the meeting, and I believe it was the end of September, which you had a conflict. I think you had planning commission. So I joined that call, and there were a number of changes to that design, including lopping off the part that goes past the city-county line. I think the main thing for trees is that, and there was no surprise here, is that as you proceed from the county line, city-county line in towards the JPA intersection, you get smaller and smaller canopy trees until you actually get to that commercial intersection, in which, because of right of way and all that, there really will be no trees. They presented a list of tree selections, tentative tree selections, that included, I think, Peggy's favorite, the honey locust, the one that she wants to plant everywhere. That's here? But so that's where they are at this point. Jody obviously is the permanent representative in the steering committee. Permanent sounds really daunting, but as long as it's a steering committee, he is the representative. So if there's more, Jody, just in terms of like us to comment further on that tree list, if you just could communicate with Peggy perhaps, and if there's an opportunity, or you perhaps have already seen it and commented on it. But in terms of like how we can engage, I think that's really the stage that project is at. The final one is East High Street, which I joined 2-3 years ago, and that's a very quick update. They're according to their timeline, they're purchasing right away. They had a design plan approved by City Council last October, and so they're hoping to begin construction in January. The critical thing for us to keep our eyes on, and Mark remembers as well because he was at the meeting, if there was money in the budget, they were hoping to underground the utilities, which means that there would be an opportunity for larger canopy trees than are presently designated for that 9th Street section. So from East High to East Market Street. So again, there's not a lot for us to do there, but I think that there'll be an opportunity when that project moves forward again. So anyway, I just thought it'd be good, since those things have been hanging out there for quite a while. Hasn't been a lot of activity. The last announcement I want to make is that Peggy and I are very grateful to Jeff Pacelli, who's agreed to serve as the Tree Commission representative on the zoning committee. It's got a much longer name than that, but we'll just call it the zoning committee for the City Climate Action Plan. And I'm not sure, Jeff, if you have, has there been a meeting, or is there anything you could tell us or update us in terms of the schedule or the process, or is that still to come? Jeff, if you're talking, you're muted. Okay, well, when he rejoins us, we'll see if there's anything to report there. But the Climate Action Plan, there are, I think, 3 or 4 large sort of subgroups, and one of them is zoning, which is a very broad, which obviously would include our area. Jeff, I was asking if you're in a position, if there's any meetings or anything you want to report to us on the Climate Action Plan. You're still muted, Jeff.
Sorry about that. Yeah, heard my dog was trying to get me to play with him. I had to kick him out of the office. I have actually not heard from Susan yet on our, I guess, first meeting or what the specific responsibilities are, but definitely looking forward to representing the commission on it.
And we appreciate your willingness to serve. Okay, so that's it for updates. Now, we sent out with the meeting packet the old annual calendar. I can't believe that we're talking about the annual calendar. Looking at it, reviewing and revising, it feels like we were just doing that. But it's that time. The annual calendar says that in December, the Tree Commission shall review and revise the annual calendar, which is part of our planning process. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to stick with our schedule. Before we get to that, though, I did attach to it, just as we were looking at next year, a list of meeting dates. And the reason being that obviously now that we're back to our, after 9 months, we're back to our customary first Tuesday of every month. We are going to continue that in 2021. There are a few dates there that are conflict with holidays. So there's just sort of proposing that we meet a little later in those months. The July meeting, which we've kicked around from time to time, not having the July meeting, but the August meeting, and not having the August meeting, but the July meeting. Anyway, the July meeting is always postponed by the 4th. So there's no surprise there. September, the day of our meeting is Rosh Hashanah. So I think that it would be we can wait into the next week to have our meeting. And then November is election day. And I don't know if we have a rule. I can't remember. We weren't meeting November of this year, but whether we choose to not meet an election evening, since for some people, an opportunity to vote comes after work. So I don't know what the tradition is. But
In the past, we have people show up with their stickers on. You know,
okay.
but-
So I mean, we can stick to that regular date. It's fine, which would be November 2nd. Otherwise, that's the meeting calendar for the meeting dates for the year. And we will meet every month, or at least 11 months next year. That's our goal. So now we get to the calendar, which I know for new members, the first time you.
And real quick about the meeting dates, did we say we were going to do July, August, September?
Well, we don't have to decide at this point. I mean, we could,
Got
but
One,
I think
would typically be knocked, July or August typically
Correct.
is, yeah.
And I think as we go through the calendar and see, because we've done this a couple of times, we did this last year, and we did this last year, I guess. We adjusted some things, but I think there was a feeling that, well, do these things really continue to correspond with other calendars, with staff calendars and with city budget calendars? That's why it's a good idea to look at it each year. And that might also determine whether we do need to meet in July, but not August, or vice versa. So I think just walking through the calendar.
Does it make sense to share the screen just to show the calendar?
If you
Want me to share it?
if you want to pull it up, yes. If people want to see the screen, otherwise there's an old-fashioned paper version in front of them. All right, the grand annual calendar of the Tree Commission. So looking at starting with January, that is the time where we elect chair and vice chair for the year. Those are one-year terms. Again, Peggy and I can't believe we're already talking about a whole year having passed, but there you are. We also review the commission objectives, annual goals, and what's what we mean by membership. I think that was more when we had openings and we were looking for filling seats, and that may be the case with 1 or 2 members this year. I don't think we're losing as many as we have, but I
think it's just myself goes off in April.
Yeah.
But generally, we just kind of look at everyone to make sure if you're coming up for re-enrollment, that you know that you have to reapply, etc.
Yeah. So that should be a short conversation this year. I have you down as being with us until July, but we can negotiate that. We can negotiate that. July of 2023, by the way.
Mike might have some questions about that.
That's what mine says. Also an opportunity for committees to review their objectives and membership. Obviously, in order to do that, the committees ought to have met. And the question always is, when you start putting things in January, that's tough if people haven't had a chance to meet during the holidays. But I'm fine with leaving that there. I don't know how other people feel based on, I know this has not been a normal year, so I'm going to say this several times as we go through the calendar. It's hard to know based on how we've conducted business this year, whether it works, because a lot of that was either postponed, delayed. So I'm fine with leaving it there unless anybody has strong feelings one way or the other. Peggy?
Not Mike, Brian. I think we looked at the composition of the committee members, but then in February, we looked at their annual goals and work plan, which would include objectives, I guess. I mean, committee's not going to have a chance, I don't think, to meet before January. So maybe we should just look at the membership of the committee so that then they'd have a chance to meet in January and be prepared to talk about their annual goals in February. Does that make sense?
Well, I think, so this is why it's good to walk through this, because it refreshes memories. I think the idea is that, so we could postpone the objectives and the goals. I mean, they're not necessarily the same thing. I mean, they can come back, and so we could look at membership in January, and then in February, have the committees come back and give us their annual goals based on their objectives and how they sort of intend to do that work during the year. So we would just strike committee objectives. I mean, I feel like the objectives are something that we have standing, they're standing objectives. So it's not a bad idea to go through them along with membership. And then the committee can go off and say, okay, based on our objectives, what are our goals? What 4 or 5 things under those objectives that we're going to work on? Make sense?
Well, if you assume that objectives are going to stay the same, maybe they will. For January.
Well, all right, so for this year, if you want, we can say review and receive annual goals, annual objectives and goals, and we'll do that in February. So the only thing we're doing in January is what? We're looking at the membership, making sure everybody's okay with with where they are.
Well, that seems to make sense to me.
Okay, that's fine. And the last thing in January, receive staff report on proposed CIP and operating budgets. So there's a lot of stuff in the calendar that talks about CIP and operating budgets. And I'm not completely clear myself as to sort of the schedule, and Mike would be best to speak to this, or Todd, whether this actually lines up with the way the process operates, or maybe Paul has some institutional memory to make sure that these budget things are happening on our calendar in the right month.
Yeah, so January, that's fine. And I think some of these other ones, because there are so many of them, I think some of them would just be updates, sort of where they are in process. But especially for this year, going into January 2021, it makes sense.
Okay.
So I'd like to keep it.
So, for example, tonight you're going to essentially give us sort of an update on where that stands. And then
That's
in
correct.
January, you would come back and you would give us sort of the final proposal.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah, that's the plan.
Right. Makes sense. All right, February, we've already dealt with the first item there. February, the second item is the 6-month dashboard, tree data and financial data.
That's fine.
Was there, I'm trying to remember, we had discussed this current year. Was there a question about whether it's both of those? I mean, that's been the process. Again, Paul, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. That's been the process that we look at both every 6 months.
Right. It's a sort of where are we halfway through? This will have certain things. Obviously, we'll be missing other things. You know, like what are we proposing to plan this upcoming year? You know, that won't be in the 6 month, but we'll know what last year starts to look like. And right. And then for the next one, the USFS grant, that's just a when provided question mark. That's only if we are trying to target it, or we're just keeping it on as a reminder. Mike sometimes goes after that grant, and then sometimes Katz goes after that grant. And so it's more of a discussion to say, all right, are we going after this for any reason? You know,
So
that's
the-
why that's there. It's a question mark, but
So the question mark was because we did that in June this year. So Mike, is that a schedule that's changed, or does that move around in terms of when we?
Are you referring to the
Clean
dashboard
water.
or?
Clean
Or the
water grant.
The USFS grant.
Oh, yeah, that was delayed this year. I think this is referring to a different grant. This is the Virginia Trees for Clean Water grant that is usually available in February.
So this is not the one to do the canopy study.
Correct.
Okay, but this one is scheduled for February. This one is
The
always February.
USFS grant, this is the clean water grant. This
Great,
is
okay.
one that we sometimes go after, or somebody goes after. We don't specifically, we just check
Okay.
around.
So we leave that on the calendar as a reminder. Anything else that anybody thinks should be in February that's not there? I know that's sort of a vague question, but tree related? No? All right. March every year, we received a report on the Arbor Day celebration. Sadly, that didn't happen this year. I wonder, I mean, that's on our calendar and we don't have to talk about it tonight, but hopefully we're coming someday to a point where we can have that again. But that seems the right, because that happens in April. So that's the correct slot for it. I don't see anybody disagreeing. Second item there, we review nominees for tree conservation. Peggy, you've had a question in the past about when we do these during the year. Are you fine? Did we move them around? We're in March, and understanding that we haven't operated normally this year, but
I mean, they can really go whenever. It's just that the council only takes it up every, quarterly, I guess.
Well, we wanted to put them on the calendar just so we do them. I'm afraid COVID, we've got 2 batches still outstanding that we haven't submitted yet. So
that's fine. We can leave March and
back to
September.
that.
March and September are fine. We don't need to move
Yeah,
them
no,
around.
it's fine. I think, we need to look at them in March again. That's good.
Okay, and the last 2 items here are looking forward to April, which again, sadly, we weren't able to do this year. Looking at meeting with NDS and Public Works Utilities to receive presentations in April. I think we're gonna endeavor to do that this year, this coming year, and I don't see a reason to change the calendar dates there. Especially since by the look of our calendar, we'd have nothing else to do in April if we didn't get presentations, which is not true. We can always find plenty of things to do. Consensus on that, we'll just hold those.
Brian, could I ask you, I wanted to ask Tim, would that correspond at all with any kind of the consultants looking at the zoning ordinance? Would they be doing that at that point? Might be a good chance to, talk about zoning changes with them. Is Tim there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm tracking along. I don't know if the Gantt chart really had it month by month, but ideally we would coordinate with NDS in a meeting like this prior to like the steering committee work. That's just my thought, so that we can have that worked out in a sort of tree commission meeting, have that discussion, then carry it forward during the kind of broader steering committee discussions for the zoning ordinance amendments.
Hey, Brian, one thing we might want to consider is having that, that note, the last note in March moved into February, just because, you know, there's potentially a fair amount of coordination we could do with utility and public works, including the sort of the illustrations for the standards and design manual that are still outstanding. But, you know, there's no problem having it on the March agenda. I'm just picturing kind of having it come up, contacting utilities, trying to figure out who's coming. And by the time you sort of coordinate it, it's already the April meeting. So we might want to, you know, those of us who are involved with it might, I suppose, just want to be ready that by March, you've already kind of mapped out where you want to get for the April meeting.
We can certainly move in February. I mean, it's no harm in starting sooner. I think others may recall this. I think that last year, again, we were talking about these things right when we get shut down, but the issue was the committee, whether the committee comes up with some suggestions or topics and comes back, or the commission discusses it and then the committee prepares an agenda and does the actual liaising with NDS and Public Works. So if we put it in February, it's an opportunity for us to talk about it as a group, and then the committee can go off and say, this is what the commission is interested in. It gives you time to liaise with these two departments. And then you can come back in March and say, here's an update, and here are the things we're proposing, and they'd like to talk about, we'd like to talk about, and the commission can say green light, and then the meeting happens in April. So I actually like that schedule.
Yeah, good. It's an ongoing process, and the players and their departments have been shifting. So
correct.
So have the politics, I'm sure.
Okay. Excellent
Hey,
point.
and real quick, just to Peggy's question, it's a great question. I have an updated Gantt chart from the consultants doing this three-pronged work for the city. It suggests that the final zoning review was supposed to start in November. And I don't think that's necessarily the case unless the consultants just haven't shared that with the steering committee yet. And it says, you know, from February to September of next year, draft the zoning map and the zoning text amendments. So I don't know if that's necessarily helpful, but I guess maybe having coordination with NDS earlier, you know, sooner rather than later is a good idea, but I don't know that it's critical, especially considering I think some of the committees, subcommittees have identified a lot of the needed, have identified opportunities to strengthen the ordinance as it relates to tree canopies.
One question about that. You said that they were doing text amendments. Do you get the feeling that this is going to be an overhaul of the ordinance system entirely, or is there going to be amendments and slight changes to the ordinances?
Well, I'm wondering if Jody is more informed about that, but I would just say from my perspective, there has not been a lot of discussion about the zoning ordinance aspect of, you know, that's the third and final phase.
It's always a little concerning when it's the third and final phase, and it's like the shortest window and the least amount of community input, but it has the biggest impact if they are making entire changes or if they're making just minor changes. Anyway.
So this is Jody. Tim's right in that it really has not been a point of discussion so far. But I know from my experience listening to our city's council and the NDS staff that the zoning ordinance needs significant updates and changes. And so I would anticipate that this is going to be a deep revision of the ordinance. And so, yeah, I was looking at, while Tim was talking, I was trying to find the same thing, what the consultants had put out for their timeline. It's evolving every month because of the delays they've experienced. But it seems to me that committees may not have much of an opportunity, committees for the tree commission may not have much of an opportunity to study and talk and meet with NDS ahead of all of a sudden having something to respond to in the way of a draft by the consultants. So I would just sort of make sure we have our committees lined up and we know who's on them, and be ready to jump into drafts that are put forward and respond to them quickly and have a procedure for getting input from the tree commission on their recommendations.
Thanks, Jody. That's good to have that clear. So there are two things here. One, I believe it was always envisioned that the Codes and Practices Committee would take the lead on this once the opportunity was presented. So to make sure that we are commenting on the code changes. I think these meetings were for sort of current issues that might be of interest that under the existing code. So I think there are two things there, and I think we need to be, I think we all agree we need to be vigilant about the changes that are coming, and we need to be prepared to act on that. And again, that falls squarely within Codes and Practices Committee, at least to take the lead for us on that. As far as these meetings with NDS and DPW utilities, my understanding from the past is that if there were things that had been kicking around in the commission for the past year, issues we'd like to discuss, this was an opportunity to sort of deep dive into some issues that were happening under the current code. Does that make sense? Does that help sort of clarify? I'm sort of making a pitch for keeping it at this time on the calendar for this issue, but this is separate from the actual engagement with this zoning process that's going on. Is that sort of square with what you're thinking, Tim?
Yeah, I don't feel very strongly one way or the other, but I think to the points that have been made, you know, just being poised to offer specific information about how we'd like to, you know, see the ordinance amended. I can recall back in January of this year when we actually met in person at NDS. I think one of the representatives from, is it Cadra, you know, the development group?
Right.
They kind of, this is when the consultant was giving us the full overview of the 3 different phases of this Seville Plans Together work. And I think it was mentioned that, well, you know, our group has a list of things that we'd like to see in the zoning ordinance change. And the consultant said, great, why don't you send those to us and we can, you know, put that away for when it's time to really start getting into that in more detail. If we have a list or even an abstract of, you know, the types of things that we'd like to see, I don't think there's any harm in sending it along to Roadside Hartwell whenever, just to get it, you know, to get it out there and kind of demonstrate that we're ready to engage in a very detailed technical way as soon as the time comes. I know when Paul and Mark and I met, it's been several months now, but we met, well, yeah, it was in person, so it's been a long time. But there was a pretty good list already going, and whether that was just sort of conceptual ideas or specific suggestions, you know, it seems like we've got some of the legwork already underway. So just to give that kind of encouraging update.
Great. So you'll keep your eye on the calendar and you will let us know when, I mean, obviously you're the point people on this, but you'll let us know when you want the commission to fully get involved or comment, so that we can, you know, so that we can do what we you know regularly do. I mean, we develop these things in committee or individually as members of steering groups, and then sort of formulate a draft document, bring it back to the commission, and then we discuss it as a whole. So,
Yep.
All right. Moving into May, staff IPM report. Is that's something I know a number of people like to receive? Is that, Mike, that now falls in your bailiwick, or who's doing IPM stuff?
Yeah, I guess if we don't have someone on staff
Okay.
before then, yeah, we'll have somebody in Parks providing the IPM report.
Okay. Then we review the commission bylaws, odd years. I chuckle a little at this because we did in 2019, and then I did a series of revisions, and then we got busy with other things, and then we started to look at building membership. And so we do have fully revised, and I think just pretty much ready to be approved new bylaws. So I think before May, in one of the next couple of meetings, I will be putting the revised bylaws. Now we may decide to make further revisions, but so whether we really need to discuss the bylaws in May is an open issue. But my sense is that's been there, Paul, on the calendar since the beginning probably. So we'll just leave that there. June. Now, some of this stuff is going to start to sound familiar to new members because we did a lot of this when we got into August and September. June, we received the arborist work plan for the upcoming fiscal year. Mike, thumbs up. We keep that there. Thumbs up. And then we received the annual update on the urban forest management plan.
Yeah, that's fine.
And again, if there's anything that anybody, Peggy, anybody, Paul, think have dropped out or we're missing.
So with the urban forest management plan, I mean, and that document that we have, Mike, is just this massive urban forest management plan that is sort of, some parts had already been completed. I mean, it's kind of old, and usually we get those updated, and we wanted to get an update of that, but then there was talk about getting an entire parks management plan that maybe incorporated this into it. Like, do you have any idea on what the direction is there? It just seems like we either need a new forest management plan, like an updated one, or it needs to be incorporated into a larger process.
Sure. Yeah. So there was a discussion a couple of years ago about having a natural resources management plan.
That's right.
Which we're still hopeful. We'd like to have a natural resources management plan, but I think the urban forest management plan will be a component of that. And I agree that it is certainly due for an update, and some of those goals are kind of their one-off goals that we can sort of check off the list. But yes, it is in need of an update.
And is that something that you would ever informally do like a update on, or that like just if we don't get a natural resources management plan, like if there's not one of those in the, because I think we talked about that last year, and I don't really see that on any of the CIP items or anything.
Right. Yes, I mean, it's something, their enforcement management plan before it was created in-house. So, I mean, it's definitely something that we're capable of doing. I also see the benefits of having a firm look at it. I think there's a benefit to that as well.
Yeah,
Also,
just a question: if we're held up and the natural resources plan is not a reality, it seems like we'd want to push for, an update to the urban forest management plan. And I don't know if there are grants available for that kind of update and how expensive those are. That seems like a low-hanging fruit. Maybe we could go after if there isn't really a near-term strategy for new, for resources.
Sure.
And I got the sense that the natural resource plan was more of a Brian Daly idea, one pushing for. Does the new leadership have the same objective?
I think that so we have some new directors, and I think there is some enthusiasm for and a need really for a natural resources management plan. But again, to be comprehensive and interdepartmental, it's quite a process. There's also, should we just make a natural resources plan that just pertains to parks? There's a few different directions to go, but I think regardless, I think urban forest management plan, as part of that document is also critical.
it's also important to note that, and again, I'm losing track of the years here, so it wasn't this year, it was last year at some point. I remember we had this discussion and Roxanne went and started to dig into it and did a spreadsheet, and brought it back to us and showed us how we could reorganize it. And so, I mean, there's been some effort there, and I think it seems the consensus of the commission is that we need to, this 2021 would be a good year to take this on and to really revise it. So that'd be a good goal for the year and a good goal for, I guess, education advocacy group committee could be working on that. You were going to say, Peggy?
Well, to respond to Jody, I mean, maybe you weren't there. One time Todd talked to us about in Fairfax County, where he was from, they had a strong natural resource plan, which included the trees management. And that was something he was looking forward to do here. I'm sure with COVID and the turnover in staff and whatnot has put that on the back burner, but I think that it's very much on Todd's radar at some point. I mean, and then the second part, the Education Advocacy Committee, we could look through that whole, I guess, a plan and see if there are things that would be worth, see if we can boil it down to some priorities.
Well, I think Roxanne's spreadsheet is a good start.
Started that.
Yeah, and I think we should continue that effort, especially if there's not going to be something else in place for 2 years, 3 years. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, I wonder too if we want to schedule it in a way that we got our urban canopy report update, which would happen, maybe this winter, and then we sort of line up funding for next. I don't know. When do you think that report's going to happen, Mike? The urban canopy one. Like, would you want to have the update to the urban forest management plan on the heels of that? And if we would want to apply for a grant next month for that, if that's available.
Yeah, so next month, or the one that is available in February, I believe. I think that you may be able to apply funds for that for an update or creation of an urban forest management plan. But we have to look at if that's the best use of those funds, or if we have something else that might be better to apply those funds for next year. So we can only apply as the organization for one project.
Right.
Can I just throw in that if we're looking at doing another survey, there are some really big improvements to the iTree tools products that are out there. I met with some folks from the University of Wisconsin who do a product that's a lot like iTree tools, but it gives you vectorized canopy locations. So not where iTree tools just kind of gives you a total number of how much canopy is in a region, but it doesn't actually give you the vectors for that, doesn't give you the polygons of where the canopy is. The new open source tools coming out of Wisconsin do. And so if we're gonna pay for a report, I'd like it to include that kind of detail.
Okay, so that's a good comment about the actual study itself. In terms of the timing on the calendar, just so I'm clear, Paul, what you were saying, are you suggesting that we should wait till the middle of the year when we get that canopy study and then decide how that's going to inform the update of the urban forest management plan? And so we kick this issue into later in the year, or? No,
I just want to make sure that, if there was if we're going to be doing that study, if the urban canopy study happens this spring, wraps up this summer, if there's funding that we can apply for next month, say, to also do an urban forestry management plan, maybe we tackle that funding now so we have it in hand to sort of reach out for that, so that they kind of fall, in step with each other, so they're speaking to each other. Okay. Potentially. So it was more of a potentially these are a good timing to talk about this if there is not already a dedicated project you're planning on, or the city's planning on to go after that funding in February. Okay, thanks.
Brian, our committee would be glad to look at those priorities. I think let's keep in mind that having the mall tree study done is really a top priority. I think it's been 3 years.
Yeah.
We couldn't ask council for CIP money to actually maintain the trees because we haven't done it. It's really important, I think, to get it done in 2021.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I mean, there are only so many things we can do. I would say the flip side is, and we don't know because none of us have a crystal ball, and none of us have been vaccinated yet, at least to my knowledge. We don't know what the year is going to look like. So there are a lot of things that we might want to do that might be more I don't know, community oriented, you know, advocacy, outreach, maybe even a planting project, all those things may go by the wayside because we won't be in a in-person mode again. So not to say that we should, I mean, we should be careful about, I said this coming into this year, we should prioritize and not take on more than we can. But if there are things that we can't do next year because we're still in sort of a semi-lockdown mode, it still may be possible to pick off one or two of these things. So, but that's a great that's a great point and a conversation we need to have as we begin in January and we start looking at our objectives for the year of what we need to do. For now, what I'm hearing is that we leave at least a line item in June for if not for this year, for future years in terms of the urban forest management plan. We're 6 months into 2021. We have 6 months to go, and we're slightly behind on a little bit more than slightly behind on the agenda. So July says tentative. August, we get the next. So this is after the conclusion of the fiscal year. We get the annual data, tree data, and financial data. Mike, is that a thumbs up? We stay in August on that, correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Right? And then we also get your report on the previous fiscal year. That makes sense. That comes at the end of the. A lot happens in August. We receive the Arborist and Committee report on preliminary fall plant lists and planting locations. Of course, this year this was done differently. We didn't have a lot of money. We were using leftover money, and the committees weren't meeting. So Mike did all of that. But one of Peggy's hopes and goals is there's a lot for the Arbor Committee that could actually be working on. So to get that committee working in 2021, since we will be back on a more normal schedule. And then here's another one of those budget things. I just need you to verify. We receive your report on the draft budget. So we start that process again in September. So that's a process that goes September through January.
Right.
Okay. September, education advocacy, we get a draft of the annual report because we've done the data in August. And again, this year is a year like no other. So we do the second nominees for tree conservation. And then we get the arborist final tree planting list and schedule that has been presented to us preliminarily, working with the committee at the August meeting. That all seems good. Nobody's disagreeing. October is when the commission approves our annual report to council. Commission review, I assume that still stands. And then we receive, we received the staff report on proposed operating budget request. All those timelines are still the same, Mike, correct? Okay. We present the commission's report in November to council in an ordinary year. We received CIP update. So help me on this because there's a lot of italics in here. That was one we did. I don't think we had finalized the calendar. Mike or anybody who is more knowledgeable on what that November agenda item is? Does that mean after the Planning Commission has had its October look that we come back and look at what the next iteration is? Is that correct? I'm not sure what this is doing in the calendars.
That looks like opportunities for tree commission input after it goes to Planning Commission. So
I think it's just a follow-up review, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Just-
So obviously that parenthetical was because that was sort of an issue when we looked at this last go around. So it says receive CIP update Planning Commission, but it really should reference the commission's input. It's not just receiving a CIP update, it's actually doing something. So does the commission, I don't recall doing this, do we look at the CIP update based on Planning Commission's review and then decide what our comments are going to be? We develop our comments. Is that the idea? Is that what happens at the November meeting? Theoretically?
Would it be I mean, this year, the planning commission is going to have a public hearing in January. I saw on the calendar for the CIP. That might be later than normal. Is that in November when we normally?
Well, sometimes there's a small group work session for the planning commission that will then go advocate for. It's basically, we just want to get before the planning commission to say, these are the things that we think are important, and here's why. And then, so this is kind of the check-in. So October, we just get ready for it. We sort of line up our CIP request, what we want to say. November, if that's when they have it, if that's when that small group session is, the update, we'll go meet with them and say, here's what we're looking for.
And then I think
Jody?
I think the tree commission then gets ready to go to city council when the CIP is presented to city council. So it goes from the planning commission looking at it, making comment. The next step is going to city council. The tree commission, if they're, want to comment, do public comment upon the CIP budget, they have that opportunity at the city council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Peggy's right.
And then this,
We have not seen the CIP draft this year. The first time we'll see it is in January. So it's hard to, I'm looking at this trying to remember what happened 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
can't remember what I did this morning, so.
I think it was earlier. I mean,
Yeah, it
everything's
totally
been
is.
delayed
early.
this year. Yeah, I think that was on there because normally we might have spoken to the planning commission in November.
okay, great, thank you. And then December is December. December is where we're at. This is what we're doing, and we have completed the review and revised annual calendar. Took a bit longer, but we discussed some other issues. So I think it was, even though it was an administrative exercise, I think it was also substantive. But by taking those 20 minutes, we are looking at, we have 2 committee reports to speak. Before we get to the data, I mean, Peggy, I'm not sure what you, I know we had talked about you're leading us through the revisions and the final data so that the commission could have a chance to see it. What's the time frame on that? 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to look at the final, yeah, we can just go through maybe these really quickly.
Okay, and maybe you could highlight and point out sort of the changes for those who are not in the committee.
Yeah. So this first one is just generally the canopy coverage in the city. And of course, we will get in 2021 the update, but you can see that canopy has gone down since 2004. The next one, I'll just go through them. This is a new one we just put in because we wanted to emphasize the goal is to plant 200 trees a year, and you can see we haven't met it yet. So it's pretty obvious. This one is just to emphasize too that how many trees we're taking down. So even though we try to plant 200 trees a year, we're barely keeping up with the number of trees we take down. And of course, the trees we take down are usually big trees. So ideally, we'd rather be planting 800 trees, but this is the way it is. Next one. Now this one, Paul, I noticed we did not put this one in the report last year. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure the importance of this chart. What do you think, Paul?
I don't know if it needs to go into the report to council, but I think it's good for us to keep track of knowing like what is a replacement versus what a new planting. So yeah, I think it's useful for us to know this. I don't think it's necessarily for council.
All right. And I guess to ask Mike a question, we can't. So the replacement means you're actually putting trees where the ones were taken down or close to the ones that were taken down. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And
I guess what this says too is Mike, is that a lot of trees that you're taking down are not necessarily, they may be in wooded areas or parks that you're not necessarily needing to replace them right away. The replacements are mostly right of way ones. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very accurate. So some of these trees that were removed, they're not suitable to be replaced. There'll be something that fell out of the wood's edge or something like that.
All right. Okay, next one. Now, this trees planted by location. What we want to do for next year, you know, the tree commission and Mike started this, a very good initiative for us to have priorities of where we're planting trees, and, you know, low income and low canopy neighborhoods was a big one. Right of ways, particularly along sidewalks or trails, another one. So we wanted to actually change this for next year to reflect our goals. But we couldn't do it this year. So this is what we have this year. Next one. So one of our goals is to plant more shade trees because they do more for health and climate and everything else. And you can see since 2017, we've done a much better job percentage wise.
Once we got Mike in here.
Yeah. And again, this is just by agency, trees planted on public property. Of course, in 16, that was the Parkway that VDOT planted so much. But now, of course, it's more Parks is doing most of it. Next one. Oops, can we turn that one?
I mean,
well, I think you all have seen this before. This is a chart we want to make a statement very clearly about the canopy coverage in different neighborhoods. And we'll show there are 4 particular neighborhoods that we're making a priority to plant in: Star Hill, 10th and Page. Let's see.
it is. I just brought it up. I brought it up in a larger format for you, Peggy.
Paul had actually highlighted the 4. Star Hill, 10th and Page, Rose Hill, and the Meadows are the 4 neighborhoods we want to target. They're
Sorry,
actually.
this is the one you wanted. Sorry, you made me do a lot of
That's okay.
copies of this. This is the one, right?
So I think that's it. We do have our CIP chart, which we're still working on.
Right. And then also in the packet, we have the, the report to council, this one here with the.
Yeah, but I don't think we're going to go over
We're
that.
not going to get over that. Okay. Got it.
Well, let's scroll down to that just for a minute. I just want to be clear since everybody's here, and that the 4-pager.
A reinvigorated vision for a green.
No, that was our statement from the.
That's the strategic plan.
Okay, sorry.
I think it may be past the data.
Pass the data.
There we go. Okay, no, it's right
State
there.
of the urban forest.
So, especially for new members, I mean, what we've been working on and getting the data updated and all that goes into this sort of report distilled. One of the changes this year the committee well agreed on was to remove the narrative from the actual table and move it into the text. Since, especially as we've been adding on to it, it gets more and more cramped and it's hard to read. So the report will essentially look like this. We're using the same graphs. The only thing we're swapping out is what Peggy referenced earlier is a new budget table. You scroll down to the end, there's a different, that last one will be replaced. But and we thought we might have a little time tonight, and we really don't if we want to keep to our agenda, but we thought we might just sort of brainstorm and kick around what the key points were from this, but that's something that several of us can pull out and extract, and it's really supposed to be my job as chair to sort of finalize this. But since Paul is only around for a few more months and he loves to do this, I'll be giving him a call. We'll chat about it over Christmas break. So, but that's where the report process stands. Did I miss anything, or is there anything you want to add, Peggy, Paul, anybody who's worked on this so far? Or are there any questions? You know, it's a lot to look at, but we had said we would get the final data for everybody to see. So thanks everybody who worked on that. And now, according to our December calendar, we are going to receive an annual report from the representative of the Charlottesville Area Tree Stewards. That's you, Mark. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. The report that I'm going to give you orally is a summary of the CATS 2020 activities compiled from the president and the 3 standing committee chairs that were given to me, and I've pulled that together. I'm going to give a copy of this to Mike for the minute's sake. And if any of you want one, I can give it to you. But we'll start with the Education Committee. The Tree Stewards Education Committee has responsibility for training new tree stewards, providing continuing education opportunities for current tree stewards, and educating the public on the value of urban and rural forests. Due to the pandemic, our educational efforts on all 3 of these fronts shifted from classroom and field settings to online modes using Zoom meetings and webinars. We have made substantial progress in converting our new 36-hour tree steward training course to online sessions. Our public education classroom sessions have transitioned to online seminars, and we are working on virtual tree walks. We are also developing an online OLLI UVA session for spring of 2021. Safety for the public and for our members is our priority, but we are looking forward to getting out on the woods for field training as soon as possible. The next is the Projects Committee, which is where we get our hands dirty. The Charlottesville Area Tree Stewards, in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic, has been able to have a significant impact on the tree canopy in our community. Prior to the onset of COVID-19 restrictions, we had several large projects that involved UVA students. Those 4 before the restrictions were in place were at the Jacksonville Elementary School that cleared debris and invasive vines, trees, and bushes from the hillside adjacent to the student gardens. Then Greenleaf Park weeded and mulched the area around the Cat's Fern Garden, which included native trees and bushes, and extended and mulched a path from the Fern Garden to the newly installed bridge. The Cat's Grove in McIntyre Park, the perimeter around it was extended by removing debris and invasive trees, vines, and bushes from the riparian buffer area, weeded around the planted trees and bushes, and mulched and repaired the wire cages as necessary. We also repaired and mulched the paths that meander through the grove, and where necessary, pruned trees. And at Jackson Burley Middle School, removed debris and invasive trees, bushes, and vines from along the buffer areas between the school's track field and Madison Avenue. Those 4 activities were primarily involving fairly large groups of UVA students, but the CATS members, in addition, have done work in the spring and this fall. The John Warner Parkway, this is the members. We pruned trees at the Route 250 overpass area and adjacent to the Charlottesville Albemarle Rescue Squad on McIntyre Road. And then we pruned the trees along the sidewalk side of the parkway from the Route 250 bypass to Melbourne Road, including the area of the Rivanna Trail in front of the Charlottesville High School Stadium. Then at the Virginia Department of Forestry at Fontaine Park, CATS members pruned 80 trees planted on the site. These had been planted 5 or 10 years ago. In the spring and later in the fall, we planted 20 more trees on the site. And also in the fall, we weeded and mulched all of the trees where necessary and replaced or repaired the tree cages. 4 more, Ivy Creek Nature Center. In the birdwatching areas, we weeded and mulched 2 adjacent areas where native trees and bushes had been planted by CATS members and local Cub Scouts. Again, replaced the tree cages. Greenleaf Park, weeded, removed invasive vines and bushes, and mulched the fern garden. Repaired and remulched the paths along the garden and the stream. Jackson Via Elementary School, removed some invasive vines and grasses from the hillside and planted 10 trees and bushes. And the CATS Nursery, which is a new thing this year because we had to move the nursery from a private property and found a lease at the Department of Forestry. We potted several hundred trees and bushes to add to the nursery's catalog. And in the spring, we had a contactless tree sale for CATS members and sold almost 300 trees and bushes, which will be planted locally. And the funds generated by the sale will be used to support CATS activities. Then the Communications Committee fosters communication among the association's members and the local community. We currently have 144 active members who have taken the 36-hour training course and who have put in about 4,300 volunteer hours so far this year. Members are invited to monthly member meetings to keep up their continuing education about trees and to learn about city initiatives. And I think that's probably where my role as liaison is helpful, to keep them informed with what we're doing. And I'll say here as an aside that both the board and the membership have been very, very thankful and appreciative of being allowed to see the strategic plan update that has been worked on by the tree committee. Many of them were very grateful to see how important the work that the tree commission does, and are interested in figuring out how to collaborate together. And I think the amount of members is a pretty deep resource to use whenever the tree commission is finding important things to develop. We have built a mailing list of over 800 local people who are interested in our activities. These people have purchased trees at our tree sales, interacted with us at table events, come to our free classes, or joined our tree identification walks. Although CATS has had few in-person events to promote since March, we have kept our communications to the community and membership through posts on our website, an active Facebook page, and mailings to the promotional list. And then our president, Rachel Keene, reminded me that we should comment about the Gateway project. In early June, the CATS board learned of a plan to construct a 10-foot wide path down the median of Route 20 where it crosses I-64 that would have destroyed about 70 trees in our Gateway project. We called on CATS members to help us save those trees, and 24 members wrote to the Board of Supervisors protesting the plan. These letters, plus public comments by several CATS members and Paul Josie of the Tree Commission, led to the Board of Supervisors unanimously rejecting the bike path proposal in their meeting on June 17th. So that's a summary of the things that CATS is wanting to be involved in and is being successful at to some extent. And like the Tree Commission, we're eager to get our vaccinations so that we can continue on with the work that we all like to do outside.
Thanks, Mark. That's an excellent report. Comprehensive. You all have been very busy.
It's surprising how much we've been able to do in spite of the restrictions, because outside you can socially distance pretty well if you plan it right.
Sure. And how did that work with lots and lots of UVA students? That all worked fine?
Well, that was in the very beginning before, things got nailed down. So we had those in place last fall, planning for them. There's a fraternity sorority that is a service organization that we work very closely with, and they have 40 or 50 kids come out 2 or 3 times in the fall and spring. And so we took advantage of their manpower to do that.
Other comments, reflections, thoughts?
I've got a few. I just have a few questions. One, I should note that I believe Robin Haynes is going to be the new president-elect coming up. I just wanted to point out to everyone she's a former Tree Commission member, so she knows who we are, and she's a great great advocate for trees in the community. And then we had talked about potentially, everyone really liked the neighborhood tree planting program, but obviously given this past year we sort of cut it. But do you think there's any interest from CATS to consider that for next year?
I think so. It probably depends on how it's approached. I think there has been some friction in the past among various members in the membership of CATS because apparently there's a lot of concern about only working on public property. And I think that came up in the past from private citizens who wanted CATS help. And the feeling was that it was an economically disadvantaged sort of approach, that people with a certain amount of money were asking for help, and there were people in low economic areas that needed the help more. And so the thing was, if we just do public stuff, then we don't have to worry about that.
Right. Yeah. I think I recall that in the past they had sort of done free tree giveaways and such, and it was sort of taken advantage of by, it felt like, by people who just wanted some trees in their backyard for free, and they could have certainly afforded it, and it didn't really provide a public good. And I think what we tried to advocate, I think in this program, was that, you know, you could only plant trees in your front yard, sort of within 20 feet of right of way, so they become a public good over time. And that it was in, you know, low canopy neighborhoods, particularly lower income neighborhoods that have the block grant designation to it. So we were trying to target sort of low income neighborhoods and street trees, so that it became a public service to a low income neighborhood. So
I think that's why the Belmont 2-year project was very effective, because that's what we did.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I personally would love to see that continue, just because it was such a great community service. I don't know if there's any way that you can advocate for that. I mean, you know, I'm sure there's just, you need people to spearhead it. But anyway, you can maybe put my name in the hat a little bit.
I think the biggest thing there is knowing how to handle the money, because you guys can't deal with money and cats can.
Right.
And so treading carefully around that issue is important, but I'm very much in favor of doing what you suggested.
Could I interject too? You know, we're the education, of course, we did the strategic plan, and obviously our priority is to plant in the low canopy neighborhoods. And we're, you know, looking at, with Anson, looking at maybe getting some grants to be able to do that, and have talked to some other organizations. So we need to get together, Mark, and you know, talk about this, because we'd very much like to, and it's a priority of the Tree Commission to, you know, and mostly in the low canopy neighborhoods, we're going to have to be planting on private property because there's very little right of way. So we ought to get our heads together and tell you what we're doing, and see if the tree stewards would be interested too. And Robin, I can see Robin's house from here, so I can talk with her too.
I think there are a lot of CATS members who would be in favor of getting more trees any way we can. You know, we just have to figure out how.
And Mark, one thing from a membership standpoint, sometimes CATS has a lot of meetings during the daytime, during office hours and during class hours and stuff. Given COVID, have you changed any of those approaches to hours? I know there's just some of the availability issues of just getting a certain demographic of, you know, parents, you know, young parents or students involved at, you know, 9, 8, 10 o'clock in the morning is always tricky. But is there ever any talk about that?
There has been just a little, but I think Robin would be open to the idea, especially now that we've had to do a lot of Zoom work. We're all more used to that. And maybe we can alternate between a daytime, which works better for the current membership, or at least seems to have, and then the next month do one in the evening. So I think there's some opportunity for that.
Yeah, that would be my only comment. Just back to them is just how do we, you know, how do we build membership for CATS? You know, and who is that target group?
Well, now that we have this online training, you know, it's almost completely done and totally revamped. It's possible to do a lot of the training using Zoom webinar kinds of techniques, which would allow other people who haven't been able to take the class during the day, and then doing stuff on weekends for field trips and field work.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that possibilities of expanding membership are pretty substantial.
Great.
Thanks for that, Mark. It's very informative and comprehensive.
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate that 144 active members is a pretty substantial resource.
Yeah.
And it showed its effect with that bicycle path issue. So as long as we can, if I can hopefully successfully communicate both ways, then I think our partnership will be valuable.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thumbs up. So, Mike, we are at the point for your report, and we can certainly, we have some flexibility near the end. We can tack 5 minutes on so we can make up for your time. So the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, for both of these, I was really hoping to have more to report. The finance department is still reviewing departmental requests. They expect to have a draft ready at the end of December, and they will be sharing it with the Planning Commission at the January 12th meeting, which will also include a public hearing. So that will be the first opportunity for the Tree Commission to have input.
Just to be clear, what's the date on that?
January 12th.
January 12th, okay.
And that is that's input on the,
in the CIP.
Yeah.
got it, just making sure, okay.
That's at 6 o'clock.
Mike, could you just, so the two things that you're asking for, are the money for the Dutch elm, not Dutch elm, emerald
Emerald
ash
ash.
and tree planting. Is that, could you just review that quickly?
So it was 75,000 for tree planting, and then it was 50,000 for emerald ash for affected trees for removal, are the two items that we are putting forward.
And you added some specificity about sort of the cost per elm. I mean, like some kind of generic number that would say, what justified the emerald ash borer number.
So I didn't give a tree example, but I heard the other comments I had in the notes. It was, I changed the title to something more urgent. I created, added more narrative to the importance of the urgency and how it creates a more hazardous situation, which then becomes more costly. And some of those other comments that I received. And then obviously the disc golf course issue and things like that. So I can share that with you. I'm
Yeah,
happy.
that'd be good.
Okay. Yeah, that would be good to have for the meeting.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
To Mike and Jody, since we will be coming to the Planning Commission and pleading our case in January, I'm wondering, Brian, if we should send the Planning Commission our strategic plan statement beforehand, just so they understand what we think about the crisis of the tree canopy in Charlottesville. Jody's probably seen it, and just as a preamble before we go, it seems to me that because the Planning Commission is also the one who, we've suggested some of the problems with the waiving front yard setbacks, for instance, is one reason why we're not able to get large trees in some of these new developments. So I think that it'd be good to let the Planning Commission know what we think.
I fully agree, Peggy. The more often they hear the need for trees and that and especially with the opportunity to in our new comprehensive plan and in the ordinance revisions to revisit, if we can, the amount of setback to allow more planting area. Yes, more often they hear it, the better. Well, we all know what the issues are, so that's why we need more planting area. Yes, but whatever you send to the Planning Commission ahead of time, I would advise it to be succinct and not long, not multiple pages, but maybe the executive summary and bullet points of the important issues. I thought the summary of the strategic plan was very good in the executive part and the listing of the issues.
Okay.
Yeah, we could certainly carve that out. It's also possible, given the timing. When does the commission normally receive materials in advance? So the meeting's January 12th.
About a week ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, because on the 8th, we're actually submitting our annual report to council too. So we would have that available. That's a brief document. And that has some different data in it too. That's very specific.
And it's always, I don't think it's just me, but it's always helpful it makes a great impact to see the graphs and visual representations.
Yep.
I was here fiddling with some numbers about what area does 490 acres of lost trees look like, and I'm coming up with about 0.75 square miles of area. To see that graphically would be very impactful, I think.
Yeah.
And then it occurred to me as the discussion of the ash borer, if it can be figured out how many in Charlottesville, what percentage of the tree coverage is represented by ashes, and what it would mean to lose that percentage of tree coverage, that might be also another very effective way of demonstrating the need for action.
Yeah.
Mike, do you recall what the percentage of ash trees are based on those on just public property that we had in our survey?
Sure. Yeah, our inventory, we're around 1%, but that's pretty typical with the rest of Virginia, as about 1 to 2% ash. But still, it's an excellent point, Jody. Imagine losing 1 or 2% of your urban canopy.
On top of the 490 acres we've already lost, yeah, in the last few years.
And also, Mike, we're losing a lot of trees that are sort of on the periphery or in the forest areas of the parks that would not be on the inventory, but they're going to come down. So it's really more than the percentage you said, isn't it?
Yeah, inventory, we have about 1%, but yeah, our forests, like West Virginia, are 1 to 2%. So, but you're going to have places like this off on the Greenbrier Fair, we're going to see big impacts because you're going to have lots of tree loss.
And the Rivanna Trail, I mean, they're already down.
Yeah.
I mean, huge loss of ash there.
Mhm.
So I'm saying that besides the inventory, there are lots of trees out in the forest that the city owns. They're going to be coming down, ash trees.
Sure.
Yeah, of 10 square miles in the city, to lose 3/4 of a square mile, that's
a lot.
yeah, it would show effectively graphically.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Excellent. Mike, on the, so that's on the CIP, on the and so we're going to go through get an opportunity to comment on that on January 12th.
Mhm.
Okay. The status for the operating budget, are we on target? What's the schedule there?
There is no update with the operating budget.
Okay,
The same moving forward.
it's moving forward, okay. So you'll have an update for us in January,
Sure.
probably? Okay.
Okay.
Great. And you want to talk to us about the fall tree planting?
Yeah, so I was hoping to have more of an update. I was hoping to have a bid awarded and a start date, but unfortunately there's an error in the pricing schedule, so it will have to go out to bid. But I will keep you posted.
So that's remind us of the number of trees and the amount of dollars.
23 trees.
Okay.
And we had, I think it was $7,300 left over from last year that we would be able to use.
Do you anticipate an update on that in January?
Yes.
And I'm self-interested on this, but can I just ask for an update on the little white oak that succumbs, that replaced the cedar and Maplewood Cemetery and Kelly? Is that scheduled to be, I know that's warranted, right?
Correct. Yeah, that tree is still under warranty from being planted last year. It has been sent to the contractor and he usually replaces them in January. So I will follow up with him and make sure that he's still on schedule.
Great. So anything else, Mike, at this point, or we're good?
That's all I have.
Okay. So now I turn to Anson if he sees anybody, and we have public comments. Anybody joining us today?
I had a question still.
Okay.
Oh, I just had a question from Mike about, I know that we've had leadership shifts and such, but the site plan review process that used to be pretty common and regularly occurring. I know with the last, city manager, they didn't want to provide that, but do you think there's a likelihood that the site plan review process will not necessarily review, but just sort of us having any ability to look at site plans will happen in the future? Like, is that something that you think will go forward now, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that. I know NDS has hired, in the process of hiring a new director, or I believe they've hired a new director that I've not met yet. But there's definitely some things like that. Finding the best way to do that and share that with the commission is definitely something we want to look at.
They use Box like we do?
I don't know what that'll be up to NDS, the best way to figure out how to share that.
And do you think we might have an answer to that possibly? Is that something you could look into?
Sure, I can ask. I'll certainly ask.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of talk about sort of a collective meeting, and just a reminder, this isn't at least personally, this was never the goal for the tree commission to review site plans, but it was just more of an understanding of how site plans get reviewed, from a institutional standpoint, so that, people in NDS know what to look for, and, whoever's looking at the final, the site as it's being constructed knows when to say, hold the presses, you've just, killed this tree kind of thing. That's kind of what we don't want to do this work. We just want to help facilitate good work. And so hopefully our involvement would be somewhat temporary. That would be it.
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the conversations we've had with Brian and Peggy and Todd this past summer, I think we understand at Parks some of the frustration and really would like to explore a better way to do that and make sure these things aren't missed.
Thanks.
Great. So I turn back to Anson. Do we have anybody in our public comment period?
Quiet on the digital front.
All right. All right. So we move to items, announcements, anything that was not on the agenda that we did not talk about. We usually don't have time for this because we're racing the clock, but we have a little time. We had planned ahead, we could have had a virtual holiday drink.
I've got one kind of fun.
Wait, Jody had his hand up.
Jody, go ahead, buddy.
I'm sorry, Anson. But sort of following up on the conversation we were just having about NDS and tree commission and reviewing site plans. It occurs to me that it'd be nice to set up something with NDS about once a year having a sort of informational lunch or something with the reviewers for NDS, and just for the tree commission to review the things that they think are important for reviewers to be aware of in regards to trees and developments. And so with the new leadership and changes in NDS, maybe there's a way of suggesting this and getting someone to work with us to allow that to happen. And rather than looking over their shoulders all the time, if we could at least just go in and talk to them and for those, if the same people the next year, just to go and have a refresher that the important things about trees and development and the critical issues to look at.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. Just a meeting.
And we stressed that when Peggy and Mike and Todd and I spoke I think that, Mike, that actually was like back in April or May, I think. We stressed that the goal of the tree commission is just to provide our input, expertise, our advice, but we have plenty of work to do, and we're not seeking to take on any more roles, nor do we think of ourselves as directing or overseeing or any of that. None of
We're
us.
adding to the bureaucracy that the planners already have to deal with. No, we want to avoid that.
So I think that's the message, and it's good that we're discussing it here in this open forum, that this is what we want to do, because as you can see from our calendar and already what next year looks like, we have plenty of work to do, plenty of things we can work on. So those are all excellent points. Anything else in our?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Open
mention,
mic. Yes.
I had hoped to have more work done for Peggy's charts and graphs, but I didn't get everything done that I'd hoped. But I wanted to show you guys, I think this is really fun. I've started using some, some front end. This is a really, what's cool about this is that I've actually been getting support from the guys who do this. This is Streamlit is an open source front end Tableau-like system, right, for big data and artificial intelligence. And, the guys who wrote this are available online. So I told them I was trying to get, data from the trees, and I grabbed the tree data, actually not from the UVA data set, but from the, from the Charlottesville data set, but from the UVA Equity Atlas, which mirrors the open data set at Charlottesville produces. And so I'm grabbing the tree data from UVA, the neighborhood data from Charlottesville, and then I run into bugs down here. And that's this is all open source, and I'm having some fun with it. But what's neat is that you can actually click on this and see the code, which it's right over here, and you can edit it in real time. And what was cool is that while I was working on this, one of the people who develops this software was like, "Hey, you've got some bugs in there." I was like, "Yes, I do. Could you help me?" And he jumped on Twitter and he's like, yeah, I forked your work. I fixed it for you. And I've copied it. And now you've got other bugs, but it's not the bugs that you thought you had. And again, I realize this is a little bit leading edge stuff, but it's pretty rad that we can pull data from the existing data sets, from multiple data sets, and start working towards doing some online analysis. And I didn't get this done in time, but I hope that by our next meeting, we'll actually have a tree widget where we can build some dashboards online that people can interact with. That's where we're trying to get to, is kind of online interactive dashboards for data review. And I just think it's really neat that this is all being done in the open source realm. And if anybody likes doing the gritty, work, that it's there, that they can clone that they can see it, that they can see how the sausage is being made. And I don't think it's really that high a standard. I think it's pretty basic for, I run this by the data science folks. This is all kind of de rigueur stuff. It's just a little bit more accessible, a little bit more transparent. So I'm stoked about that.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's
Great.
fun. Yeah.
I'm so
I know
glad-
very little about what you presented, but it sounds awesome. I am
I think-
totally excited about it.
We really want to get, I talked to this guy who's doing the iTree tools updates and looking at how do you find ash trees from the data, and it turns out their leaves turn purple in late October. So we need to start, trying to figure out if we can use AI to find where the ash trees are really, and pinpoint it down to the 10-meter resolution, 5-meter resolution, because it's the only way you're going to be able to really knock this out effectively, is to be able to find the real trees on public property or on private property, pardon me, before they die, or if they are dead, trying to identify that. And that's all discernible with the level of data that we've got. It's just going through the process. And so if we're going to hire somebody, I got a couple people in mind over at the University of Wisconsin who could probably help us actually pinpoint trees, or tell us where to order data to pinpoint trees. Again, we may have to wait a year to do that effectively because leaf color seems to be a big issue. But I'm stoked about the data science on all this. I think it's really exciting.
Anson, I sent you the, and I think Paul had recommended too, the Google.
Yeah, Google Canopy. They haven't gotten back to me on that. Google is doing a Canopy lab that's spectacular.
Yeah.
For LA County, and they say they have data for Albemarle and Charlottesville. And hopefully they'll let us into their developer program somewhat soon. Yeah, Google's got product. A lot of people are looking at Canopy right now. It's really a good time to be on that bandwagon. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I just want to say by way of reflection at the end of this strange, sad year that I'm heartened that we have a commission fully staffed, that we have such diverse skill sets. I know Peggy said she's looking to develop a new one in the new year, so maybe you could teach her this stuff, Anson. But it's great. We have overlapping interests, overlapping skills. Some of us are way past others in certain areas, but we're bringing it all together, and that really it's gratifying, even though we've had a rough patch. I think we're back on our feet. Looking forward to a new year. There's certainly a lot of hope on the big picture out there, and for the tree commission as well. Are there any other comments?
I would just add to that comment, Brian, thank you for your leadership. You're a big reason why we came back so strong after being down. So thank you.
Agreed.
Yes.
Well, I have to say, there've been a lot of people working hard in the background. So you know that when we submit the annual report to council, there's also a separate document of activities of the year. And the committee agreed a couple of weeks ago that we wanted to actually include that as part of the report. Since the report's only 4 pages, it'll be like page 5. So it won't be a separate document. And you'll recall our first meeting back in August when we got back together, we had kept a running list of how we had individually continued to advocate, to educate, to participate, even in the depths of the lockdown when it wasn't possible. So that will be included, perhaps not in a name-by-name basis, but we are going to be able to show that even though we were 4 or 5 months unable to meet, we continued individually to push forward and advocate, and our passion for trees and for a greener city, for healthier neighborhoods, that work actually continued. So, and that's a testament to a lot of people. So I thank you all for doing that. If there are no other comments or items, we're going to let everybody go as a early holiday gift, go 10 minutes early, including our friends, Brian Wheeler and the communications staff. Jody, I would say that we couldn't do it without them. It wouldn't be possible for us to be doing these meetings. And so we're grateful to you, and also to add in the committee meetings. That's wonderful. So thank you all.
And I got one more thing, Jody, just because you asked, I'm just going to show this really fast. This is what the canopy loss looks like in Charlottesville.
Wow.
There's your big circle. That's how much we lost in 10 years.
And it occurred to me as I was saying that that's 0.75 of a square mile of the canopy. So how much canopy? I mean, I'm sure all 10.4 square miles of Charlottesville isn't covered by canopy. So this is even more impactful, knowing that our canopy coverage is smaller than 10.4 square miles.
Right.
And we're losing almost a square mile of it.
Yeah. There's your. We'll get to this next time. Sorry, Brian, to steal your thunder. I just finished this up and I wanted to show it.
No, that's great. That's a sobering way to end the year, all the good things, and we have that. And also, I just want to make one comment that Mark moved from a very green scene to what looks like devastation. I'm not quite sure.
No, it's not. You know what it is?
Winter, new trees coming up.
This is.
Oh, I couldn't tell from the screen.
It's Big Meadows, and I went to Big Meadows
Big Meadows.
weekends ago, It is the richest biodiversity in Shenandoah National Park. It's a mafic fen fed by mineral-rich water, and it was just a fabulous place to take a walk. I'd never been there before. So it really is a big meadow. full of
best.
deer and
Okay,
ox.
see, I keep it on gallery view because I'm watching everybody. So when I went to speaker view, I saw it. When it's on gallery view, it wasn't as clear. So thank you, because I thought some devastation had happened.
I think my conclusion is that biophilia is possible in the winter for sure.
Well, there's no better line to end our year on. So with that, I wish you all a happy holiday season, and we will see each other again in January.
Thank you.
Here.
Thank
Good
you,
to see
everybody.
y'all.
Yeah.
Take care.
Hello.